Hello students, good morning. In this video, we are going to do the later part of the consequences of the revolt of 1857, and then we'll be doing the drawbacks of the revolt of 1857. So in my books, it is page number 19. You can see accordingly, we are doing the 10th point under the heading consequences of the First War of Independence, or the revolt of 1857. We have done many different consequences. First is the change in the rule. From the company's rule, it came down to the crown. And then there was Queen Victoria's proclamation, what all promises they made, that there will be no intervention in the social and cultural policies, and everybody will be treated equally. They will be given a proper pardon to all the people, those who are arrested, unless and until they are not arrested for the crime of murder of any British. So all these things happened. Then this particular revolt also marked the end of the Peshwas and the Mughals. Along with that, the princely states were given a particular freedom whether they want to have their particular children, the adopted children, to be the legal heir. They will be accepted as the legal heir to the throne by the British, and there will be no more doctrine of lapse, or you can say the policy of annexation applied in such cases. Next, we see that now British were quite apprehensive, and they did not want any more such revolts of the Indians, and that is the reason why they came up with a new policy to keep all these Hindus and Muslims divided and fighting among themselves so that they can have a better and more comfortable rule. For this, they came out with the policy of divide and rule. Next was racial antagonism. That means British believed in their racial superiority, and everywhere they had different markings, specially reserved areas for the British, and it was written over there, Europeans only, or white only, or Indians and dogs not allowed. So this kind of superiority was established everywhere, so that to demean and to bring down the Indian. So that kind of atmosphere was there. Foreign policies also changed. Indian foreign policy was dictated by the interests of the British government. Only those particular foreign things and terms will be maintained which are going to give better benefits to the British. So for the benefit of the British, Indian foreign policies were altered. Next, we see increased racial bitterness. After the uprising, racial bitterness increased because the British dubbed all Indians as unworthy of trust and subjected them to insults. Even those people who were always loyal to the British, they were also discarded, and they were also not considered trustworthy enough. The entire structure of Indian government was remodeled, and the important and the superior and the better places were all given to the white. Indians were given the lower and the most, you can say, not so important positions, because of the simple reason that they might anytime misuse the power given to them and retaliate and turn against the British. So nobody in the British, nobody wanted to believe or trust the Indians because of this particular revolt. Lastly, we see over here the religious changes. The British rulers declared emphatically their policy of non-interference in the religious affairs. That means the customs, traditions of the Indians, they are not going to interfere with that. They are going to leave it to Indians only what and however they want to deal with their religious customs. So these were the various changes which happened as a consequence of the revolt of 1857. But the most important thing that was the consequence of the revolt of 1857 was the changes that were brought in the army. Remember, earlier it was in the military causes also we have done that the army was quite disproportioned. That means every particular area of British rule, there were thousands and thousands of Indian soldiers, and there were very few number of British soldiers. At one particular place, we can say that the ratio of Europeans to Indian troops was fixed at 1:2 in the Bengal army, and 2:5 in Madras and Bombay armies. That means now it was made that for every one individual Indian, one particular British person, there will be only 2 Indian people. Similarly, in the Bengal army, and in the Madras and Bombay armies, 2 British over every 5 Indians. But earlier it was not like that. Earlier it was 1:40,000. That means over one particular 40,000 Indian soldiers, there will be one British officer. So that was a very faulty distribution of the power of the people, and that was something which led or motivated people to rise against the British enemies, because they knew that they are huge in number as compared to the British. But obviously British soldiers were there and they very easily were able to break out. And then we even had the traitors in our own particular place. Then we had many of the people, those who wanted to remain loyal to the British. So for all that various reasons, we can say we were not able to have successful revolts. But yes, British did understand this, and they knew that any day if all these Indians, especially even in the army, if they come together, that will be very difficult for British to maintain any control over them then, because of the huge number that surpasses their particular army. So the army was called out, more people were called out, and they were made better in ratio in proportion to the Indian people. Practically the same ratio was maintained everywhere till the First World War. The general principle adopted was that the number of Indian sepoys should not exceed twice that of the European troops. Like if there are 40,000 British people, then there should not be more than 80,000 Indian. They should be just less than twice the number of the British. So that is how they were all maintaining a particular proportion. European troops were kept in key geographical and military position. That means the most important places, the most important areas from where the enemies could attack and grab their territory. In those areas, important places, British troops were always hired, and their white soldiers were more in number so that they could control areas from where the Indians could attack and take over that particular place. So those areas were considered as the very important places for where Indians could attack, or where outsider, any other power, international power could attack. So those powers, important places were, and even the outer boundaries or border areas of the Indian subcontinent, they were all controlled by the white people or the European troops. The earlier policy of excluding Indians from the officers' corps was strictly maintained. That means earlier also they decided that Indians will not be given any higher positions in the military. Now they staunchly believed it and followed it, because they knew if Indians will be given any higher position, they might anytime misuse their position, and even might tend to help out their Indian contemporaries to have a revolt or a war against the British through their own British artillery and things. So that is why they were never given any important post or position and corps. Next we see discrimination on the basis of caste, region, religion was also practiced in the army. The organization of the Indian section of army was based on the policy of balance and counterpoise or divide and rule. That means most of the Indian soldiers were not put together, especially those coming from the same area or same region, or along with that we can say even from the same caste. So these region, religion, caste, these were the basis on which Indian people were divided, so that they do not come together as one group and put up a fight or resistance against the British. So on that basis, because they knew Indians staunchly believe on their caste, religion, region, so on those basis it will be easier to divide them. So that is how they got a mixed bag of soldiers from different areas speaking different languages, because India is so diverse. So it was very easy to have Indian soldiers who were totally ignorant of each other or their regions or their customs or their religions or their castes. So that is how it was easy to have a difference between the different Indian soldiers, and putting them together meant that there will always be differences among them. They will never unite as one particular group. Besides that, newspapers, journals, nationalist publications were all prevented from reaching the soldiers, because they knew if Indian soldiers, those who are working in the British Army, if in newspapers, journal, anywhere, they find certain news about the retaliations, the revolts, and if they are also agitated, it might spark spark the fire in over there, and it might lead to a huge revolt once again if once army gets involved in the civilians revolt. So they were kept totally segregated away from all the news of what's happening in the country. We know it's very easy at that time because there were no phones, no telephones, televisions, no particular connectivity. So it was easy to keep people segregated and away from all the knowledge of what is happening around them in the other part of the country. So that is how this particular way they were kept away from the general public, so that they remain loyal to the British. Next is India was turned into a typical colonial economy, exporting raw material and importing the finished goods. This was still maintained. Their finished products were sold in India at a cheaper rate. That was still sabotaging the Indian culture, destroying the Indian made goods, because raw material was taken from here, but that benefit was not given to Indian economy. That also went under the pockets of the British. And then the finished goods which were sold over here, all that profit was also into the British pockets. So in both the ways, it was easy for British to maintain this country as their agricultural colony, or the colony which is just going to export the raw material at a very cheaper rate and import the all the products and buy and sell and give profit to the British. The salary and allowances of the Secretary of State and members of the Indian Council, Indian civil servants and military officers were all a large drain on the country's resources, because all these people were British. These higher posts were not given to the Indian people, and as all these people were British, that meant all the money which will be given to them as salaries will be going into the pockets of the British or the British Empire. So ultimately that is also going back to them only. So in every particular manner, we can say possibility was that all the wealth was draining from India to Europe. Peasants were impoverished under the British rule. The indigo peasants of Bihar revolted on a large scale, but even after revolt of 1857, that was in 1866 to 68, they kept on revolting, but hardly to make any difference. And then the Indians had to pay heavy tax, interests and dividends on the British capitals invested in India. Whatever the public property was given by the British, if Indians were using that, they had to pay heavy taxes for that. The British invested their surplus capital in India in railways, plantations, coal mines, jute mills, shipping, and that was not for the purpose of giving any benefit to the Indians, but rather to easing out their trade, to make or get benefits from these particular things for their particular themselves. So it was their selfish reason for which they did all these things. Although we can say railways and shipping and all these things did help the Indians later onwards to execute their plannings and plottings in the freedom fight, but here we can say that they were all established to give the better conditions to the British in India. Next point that we see over here is rise of nationalism. The uprising of 1857 was the first struggle of Indian people, but that was not for the freedom of India from the British bondage. But as a consequence, we can say this was the first time when Indians learned that if they unite or if they come together, they can also put up a very good resistance or a good opposition to their British contemporaries, and even can defeat them and throw them out of the country. So it gave them a moral boost. They until now felt that British are invincible, they cannot be defeated, almost godlike, they cannot be nobody can fight and defeat them. But now they got the idea that we are huge in number, and if we put up a good fight, we can also make all these British go out of this country, and we can also attain freedom and be free like most of the European nations. So this idea of freedom, liberty, now it germinated, now it started, and that is how Indians got this idea that even they are liable enough or they are capable enough of getting freedom. Lastly, we see widening of the gulf between Hindus and Muslims. That is all an extension of the point of the revolt of the policy of divide and rule. As I told you, Hindus were favored and Muslims were considered as the real perpetrators or the people, those who really started the revolt. And that is how the people were built up in such a way by the British that Hindus were forced to have all the knowledge against the Muslims, and Muslims were segregated in such a way so that they turned totally against the Hindu brothers. And that is how the Indian country was divided into two different parts, and this rift, this gap was ever increasing. Gradually it did end up dividing the country into two different parts, and now we can say dividing the entire Indian subcontinent into three different countries: India and the East and West Pakistan, which now becomes Pakistan and Bangladesh. So that is how the Indian country subcontinent was divided, because of this particular point that was started and very nicely executed by the British. Lastly, we see the chapter heading Drawbacks of the First War of Independence. Drawbacks, we can even understand them as the reasons for the failure of the revolt, and that is the movement did not have a common plan of military action. That means there was in the nationwide revolt, but the military was not operating it. It was not something where military execution and proper discipline was there. Some people, peasants, were doing it, some educated, unemployed, and women and children, everybody was doing it, but that was on a very restricted manner, on a very controlled manner, and nobody knew what to do, how to do. British army, which was there as their opposition, was an army which was very disciplined, and they had the proper tactics and techniques to control this. But these Indians, though they were huge in number, they did not have any techniques, tactics and military planning how to execute their revolt. So that became one of the important reasons for the failure of the revolt. Next, we see that the movement had no common goal. Their common goal was of all the revolts was not that we want freedom of the country from the British hands. It was rather their own particular, I won't say selfish, but their own individual different groups had different reasons, and they were fighting for their own cause. They had nothing in the mind that they should be asking for freedom. Rather, they were asking for revenue, for jobs, for this, for that, for various reasons. Even the main instinct impetus was the cartridge and field rifles. So even that was something where they agitated not for the freedom, but rather for not using the rifle. So all the way we can say that these all revolts had different causes, but no particular common cause on which they could be united as one revolt. The East India Company had the services of men of exceptional abilities. As I told you, these people in the British Army, they were exemplaries, they were good people in terms of discipline, in terms of warfare, in terms of knowledge of the weapons they were using. So they were modern people, they had all the knowledge. Indians, those who were under them were loyal to them. Those who were not with them were against them. Very few of them were the people, those who were learned enough to understand the weaponry and how the techniques and tactics are to be used to fight against the British. So that is why also we can say British always had the edge of having better men in the war against the Indian. The British Empire had far superior resources, all in terms of men, money and material. So that is how also Indians were no match for their British opposition. The movement did not have nationwide dimensions. Most of the people did not join these revolts, like we can say the South India and most of the Eastern or Western India. This particular revolt did not reach, or the information of the revolt did not reach. So they somewhere or the other did not revolt, or rather if they revolted at very small levels which were almost negligible. So there was no particular revolt as such. And then the Sindh, Rajasthan, they remained quiet. Nepal even helped in the suppression of the movement. They were trying to be loyal to the British. And then Bombay, Madras armies remained loyal to the British. They did not join this revolt. As a result, these people, if they would have joined, they would have created a more mass revolt. But their revolt, helping the British or showing their loyalty to the British did end up having a negative effect on the revolt which were passed and which were started in India in different parts. So it would have ended in a better way if more people would have joined the revolts in the different regions also, but did not happen. So because of that also we can say it turned out to be a reason for the failure of the revolt. Some of the rulers of Indian states and big zamindars refused to join because they were happy under the British, getting pension and all the alliances, so they did not allowances, and that is why they did not want to show any particular disloyalty to the British. So some sections of the Indian society were hostile to the uprising, for example the moneylenders and the big merchants, and besides that some zamindars of Bengals were loyal to the British. So all this added up from them not participating in the revolt. Lastly, we see the uprising was supposed to begin on May 31 because of the Mangal Pandey issue. It started on the 9th and 10th of May, and that was way earlier than the proposed time. Because of also there was a lot of confusion, and so people could not join or could join it but not to all together. And this mismanagement, haphazardness of the revolts, of all the revolts which were planned to start all together, that created more of the chaos in the Indian side and helped British in curbing the various revolts, the smaller ones first, and then getting on facing directly the bigger revolts. So that is how all these reasons were the main reasons why the revolt came down as a failure, though it is considered as an important thing because it gave the idea to the Indians of the freedom struggle, but it was eventually a failure in its own particular dimensions. So with this, we come to the end of the first chapter, that is Revolt of 1857. In the next session, we will be starting with the new chapter, and along with that, I will be giving you the work question answers later onwards that you have to finish in your fair copies. So with this, we come to the end of this module. Have a great day.